Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the Actual Magician's Bookshelf. Yes, I am an actual magician. And in episode 23 today, we are going to be covering another letter from Aleister Crowley, Magick Without Tears. This version introduced by Israel Regardie, and we looked in our last video at one of the letters in here. And today we are going to look at Chapter 64 on magical power. And we're also going to take a note from this where Crowley says, you must lay to heart Magick, chapter 14, and never forget one detail. More failure comes from neglect of this than from all causes put together. And this is the magical link, what's called the magical link. So that's interesting. I'm doing this unscripted, so the light has decided to help me out there by just darkening everything other than magical power. Dun dun dun. And again, this is one of the things that you cannot make up in magic. Magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will, and Crowley explains this very, very importantly in chapter 14, which is of the consecrations, with an account of the nature and nurture of the magical link. And whilst this is about consecration, it's more importantly about the magical link. And Crowley actually says, it is a strange circumstance that no magical writer has hitherto treated the immensely important subject of the magical link. It might almost be called the missing link. It has apparently always been taken for granted. Only lay writers on magic like J.G. Fraser have accorded the subject its full importance. And of course, Fraser wrote The Golden Bough, and this is what Crowley is referring to. So basically, in chapter 14 of Magick, he's talking about the magical link, and it's a very, very long chapter of the consecrations. And it goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pages. And it ends with, let the magical link be made strong. It is love under will. It affirms the identity of the equation of the work. It makes success necessity. And basically, this whole section here of 13 pages on the consecrations explains why so many people who might call themselves an occultist, an esotericist, a magician, on always achieving their will through their magic, through their actual magical practice. And whilst someone may be able to summon Beelzebub or Ashtaroth or any entity, any goetic demon, anything from the so-called PGM manuscripts, whether it be a deity like Anubis or Isis or Ceridwen, whatever it is, it isn't always leading to the results that some people might actually want or might actually claim. And quite often, for example, if people are into making money, then they are often making money by teaching you how to make money, but not by the method that they are using, which is teaching people how to make money is making them money, not the actual thing that they're talking about, because they never talk about the actual thing that will work because they haven't been able to make it work, which would reduce the necessity of them having to make money by doing something else, by telling everyone else how it works. So having said that, I'm going to hopefully demonstrate why magic is a living act that we engage with, that is around us all of the time, that just shows up whenever we need it. And then, as Crowley actually goes on to say, it becomes unnecessary really to, for example, cast a circle, because the whole universe becomes our temple. It is actually our work, our laboratory, our great work is the act of living itself, with a slight difference perhaps to the way someone who is not a magician is living their life, which hopefully we'll explain with the magical link. So let's start off with what Crowley writes in his letter, which is letter number 64 on magical power, and then we'll come on to the magical link itself. So this is letter 64, magical power. And he begins with, Karasara, rightly you remark that most of these letters have dealt with self-development in one form or another. Now, what of the causa finalis, the practical angle, some would call it? What you want now is to learn how to apply the knowledge and power that you have gained to the execution of your true will, to the accomplishment of the great work. Obviously, much will be left to your own common sense. The one technical point on which I insist above all others, writes Aleister Crowley, which I insist above all others is the magical link. You must lay to heart Magick chapter 14, which we'll come on to, and never forget one detail. More failure comes from neglect of this than from all other causes put together. Most of the qualities that you need are inborn. All of the material is to your hand, and to develop them is a natural process, equally your birthright. Again, Crowley really felt that magic is a natural thing. It's an intrinsic part of the universe, and it's part of our evolutionary schema to actually develop a magical understanding and a magical relationship with the universe itself. But the making of the link, the magical link, is an intellectual, even mechanical task. Success depends on purely objective considerations, and we'll come on to this idea when we look at it in magic, that it is a objective thing, that there is a reality which we may be subject to in our relationship to it, but the universe is not simply a magical, mystical, mental experience of which we are the sole creator, the Lord of all things. And people who use that argument or that philosophy, that basis, are somehow divorcing themselves from the actual fact that there is a reality to which we are beholden. And Crowley makes this point as well. Crowley meets it head on and thinks about it, considers it, and uses it in his explanations of how magic works and how he's made magic work, and sometimes when he's failed to make it work as well. Crowley is considering all of that later on in his life in Magick Without Tears. So 64, magical power, really important, and chapter 14 of Magick, really important. I reread it just today in order to do the video, and it still has a lot to teach us. It still has a lot in there that's really important to consider. So he goes on to think about the magical link to his student, and he says that firstly, while of course the magical theory supposes a kind of omnipotence, please remember that magic is science, that the laws of nature remain the same, however subtle the material with which one is working. It is, to put it brutally, a bigger miracle to destroy a fortress than an easy chair. Basically, he says that the laws of nature still apply even in magic, because magic is a natural thing. That argument goes together. And he goes on to say that, for example, if you were trying to do something in real life, for example, move a mountain, then the same rules still apply in magic. It's far easier to move a pen than it is to move a mountain. The same rules still apply. We are not suddenly transposed out of that relationship in the astral world, in the etheric world, whichever world you want to talk about, and Crowley does in chapter 14, the same rules, the same ratios still apply. And this is why not every magician is running the world. Not every magician has anything that they want at the click of a finger, because that is not how it works, and it cannot be demonstrated to work that way either. And that's fine, because understanding that gives us a far better opportunity and chance of success in our rituals. And this is where chaos magic really, when Pete Carroll first produced Psychonaut and so forth, Liber Null, he was really after a formula, a mechanical formula, to make a model of why some spells work and some spells didn't, and he has a formula for that. And to some extent, he does take into account the material nature of the universe, or the reality of the universe and its ratios, in order to actually have a formula and a relationship of it as well. So Crowley goes on to say, it is much simpler to look for an existing force in good working order that is doing the sort of stuff that you need, and take it from there, or control in it just that bit of it that you happen to require. So he's talking about not doing things that are entirely separate to what you have to hand and what exists. For example, trying to make a utopia by snapping your fingers is trying to use every social force, every political force, every single thing that is around you, in order to shift all of that into a totally new state. And it's far better, for example, to make a candle go out by magic when the candle is already burning itself out. In terms of lighting it in the first place, it's a harder job to do it. These same ratios apply even with a non-causal or apparently non-causal connection between the spell and ritual that you're doing and reality as it appears to us. So what does Crowley go on to say? He talks about Hitler and Germany and how that was both successful and ultimately failed, in Crowley's terms, according to what a social experiment by magic, as Crowley saw it, was trying to attempt. And then he goes on to say, I suspect that your question contemplated so much power as powers, things like healing the sick, making oneself invisible, kindling a flame without combustibles, bewitching the neighbour's cows, spoiling your friend's honeymoon, fascinations, levitation, lycanthropy, necromancy, all of the regular stuff of the legends and the fables, and also all of the regular stuff that a lot of books on magic tend to have spells for. And then he goes on to say, the best excuse for trying to acquire them is that one learns a lot in the process. And that's really important. Crowley is saying that one of the important things about doing this is the best excuse for trying to acquire powers is that one learns a lot in the process. I once asked my second magical teacher, what is the thing that makes what we're doing in our magical practice different to what other people appear to be doing that we were meeting at the time? This is just before the internet. And he said it is synthesis. It is bringing it back down and considering the results of each working, each spell. Why did it work? How did it work? Was it different? Did we do a spell for £5 and got £10? Does that mean that the spell has worked, or it's a failure, or does it mean it's overworked or underworked? What has happened there? How do we explain that thing? And more importantly then, how do we experiment again in order to check that and go back round the Kesheth part of the Tree of Life, as we've looked at in the previous video, and go round the moon path down the experimentation path into the last judgment path to do something, across the blasted tower path to analyze it, and then synthesize it with the world, nature as it appears to us, our own experience in the center path. So Crowley goes on to say that such powers are never to be considered as the main object. It ought, in fact, to be obvious from the start that anyone's true will must be deeper and more comprehensive than any mere technical achievement. Becoming a magician is not an actual magician, in my view, is not being able to do a load of magical spells, a load of invocations, a load of evocations, a load of banishing, a load of consecrations, a load of astral travel. It is far bigger, wider than all of that. These are merely tools that we have in order to explore and examine our relationship to the universe itself. And this is where it's important to have that from the beginning, I think. Otherwise you go down a path that makes you a better zealotor, and people can spend their whole lives just becoming a better zealotor. And sometimes they're not even a very good zealotor because they've never really thought about why their rituals haven't changed their life, why their rituals have not changed their state of being. Or sometimes it makes a more limited state of being, not a freer, more transcendent, more wider, comprehensive, consistent and congruent state of awareness than they had to begin with. And sometimes people cannot actually see that that's happening to them, and in effect they're broadcasting it by their communications all of the time, and people are attracted to that because it seems powerful, but it's only in the seemingness that is the attraction. And this is where that weird form of control comes on with certain occultists and magicians. So Crowley goes on to say that I will go further and say that such endeavour must be a magical mistake, like cherishing a gun or a clock or a fishing rod for its own sake, and not for the use that one can make of it. And he's saying that picking up your ability to work with an ancient papyrus in order to invoke a spirit is fine, but that is like saying, here is my fishing rod. Isn't it the best fishing rod that anyone has ever seen? And not actually going to fish with it, but also not realizing that that is merely a tool to get food, because food and sustenance is actually the aim of it, and having a good meal is the purpose, not the fishing itself, not the fishing rod itself either. So he goes on to say, indeed, that remark goes to the root of the matter, for all these powers, if we understand them properly, are natural byproducts of one's real great work. My own experience was very convincing on this point, for one power after another came popping up when it was least wanted, and I saw at once that they represented so many leaks in my boat. As Peter Gabriel says in Mercy Street, I picture a soul with no leaks at the seams. And Mercy Street, for those with a Kabbalistic background, will know what the translation of mercy is, and will be able to examine Mercy Street as the path that leads to mercy itself on the Tree of Life. Peter Gabriel has encoded that into Mercy Street. But at that point, your soul has to have no leaks at the seams. And Crowley says the same. I saw at once that they represented so many leaks in my boat, they argued imperfect insulation. And really, they are quite a bit of a nuisance. Their possession is so flattering and their seduction so subtle. One understands at once why all the first-class teachers insist so sternly that the Siddhi or Idai must be rejected firmly by the aspirant. if they are not to be sidetracked and ultimately lost, or go far down an avenue where it's really difficult to get someone back because they think that that is the whole world down that one avenue, when in fact they have missed hundreds of different avenues and also the magical one as well. And so Crowley just ends the letter, again, letter 64, with, "Then again, when these powers have sprung naturally and spontaneously from the exercise of one's proper faculties in the great work, they ought to be little more than leaks. You ought to be able to organise and control them in such wise that they are of actual assistance to you in taking the next step." And he capitalises next step, because he's talking about initiation. Grades, the grade system, grades, the English word for that comes from the Latin gradus, which means step. Literally the steps on the tree of life, the steps on the ladder of initiation. And so next step is the next grade, is the next state of consciousness shift on the tree of life that is the most important thing. You ought to be able to organise and control them so that they are of actual assistance, and we'll come on to that in a moment. After all, what moral or magical difference is there between the power of digesting one's food and that of transforming oneself into a hawk? And he ends quite nicely. That being the case, let me transform myself into a butterfly and flit on to other honeysuckles. Love is the law, love and the will, yours fraternally 666, the great beast. So there's the idea in here of letter 64 that magical power is utilising our state, our relationship to the universe, and understanding that there is a real component to that, a material component. That when people say that they have a philosophy that the universe is a mental experience, an experience of the mind, and therefore you shouldn't be able to disagree with them or argue with them about, for example, how the holy guardian angel exists and whether that is different to every human being, therefore you can't actually define it, state it, and this excuses why they haven't even worked with it the way it is written. There is a tendency to try and have your cake and eat it, and as Crowley says, this is Tommy rot. It is the sense of, oh, it's all a mind experience. However, there are some real things in it, but those real things you can call whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. And the reason is because I haven't done that, because I don't need to do that, because the universe is, and it's a big circular cloud of nonsense. And one of the greatest things I owe one of my teachers is symbolic logic, is to force me to read some of Charles Dodgson's, Lewis Carroll, symbolic logic, and to start to think about how the mind makes arguments, how the mind and logic work, but also the limitations of that as well, because on the tree of life that is only hard as we go up the tree of life. And our feelings have to take centre stage as well and be balanced with hard under our awareness to make our yesod, and then our relationship to the world at the bottom of the tree of life. And that all of these are equal. There's a danger that as we feel we go up the tree of life, and monkey brain is like up is higher, but up is just the same. If you look at the tree of life on a flat diagram, then you never go up at all. You just go further along the way. And this is the actual experience that Crowley is talking about. When we have magical experiences, when something happens out of the ordinary, it should actually teach us to be aware of our questioning and our inquiry into the universe. To me, the universe is an act of inquiry. It is inquiring into itself as to possibility through difference. As Crowley says, I'm divided for love's sake, for the chance of union. The idea of the universe only needing to know one thing, which is, what am I? And this is our quest as well. And that's no surprise, because to some extent we are the awareness of universe itself in one bound system. And so spells and magical power and so forth are not to be taken as tests, as badges of honor, as certification of progress, as to anything else, other than they get you to ask better questions, bigger questions, and again, more congruent ones, more consistent ones, more comprehensive ones, in order to really align, examine and question one's relationship to the universe itself. So that was letter, what did we say? It was letter 64 of Magick Without Tears. I'd ask you to go and read that in full, and then what we're going to do is, in my next video, I'm going to record the second part of this and look at chapter 14 of Magick and look a lot more deeply into that as well. If you want to get a head start, then definitely read chapter 14 once you've read the letter in Magick Without Tears. So chapter 14 of Magick by Aleister Crowley, this version, page 228. And it's on consecration, but I'd ask you in particular to look at the magical link section, and we'll be talking about that, and I'll be hopefully trying to guide you through at least my take on it in our next video as well. So thanks a lot, and as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop.